26 years ago, this man murdered and ate a woman in Paris. He has never stood trial. Today, he walks the Tokyo streets a free man. A free man with an ongoing appetite for human flesh. Number 10, Rue Élanger, Paris. Here, the man who became known as the Japanese cannibal spent 48 hours indulging in his lifelong fantasy on a young female victim. Then, on the evening of June the 13th, 1981, the killer emerged. Dragging 2 large suitcases, he hailed a taxi, instructing the driver to take him to a nearby park. The man and his cargo traveled through the city streets undetected. Arriving at the Bois de Boulogne, a densely wooded park on the outskirts of Paris, the killer believed this to be the ideal location to hide the evidence of his crime. But with its island restaurant, the park was a popular destination, and it did not go unnoticed that a 4'9", smartly attired Asian man was struggling to drag 2 large suitcases towards the lake. The unusual-looking man rested on a bench, falling asleep only to awake to see an elderly gentleman opening one of the bleeding suitcases. When the old man started to scream, the killer stood up and calmly walked away into the night. With the police arriving on the scene within minutes, Olivier Foll, Deputy Chief Constable of the Paris CID, took charge of the case.
The
description of what was found is horrible, because it was 2 suitcases found by passers-by and containing pieces of human body. It was appalling, nightmarish.
What was striking was that someone had removed flesh from some parts of the body. It was obvious, and that puzzled us.
The police arranged for an autopsy. They quickly deduced that the victim had been shot in the back of the neck at point-blank range. But with the face badly mutilated, the corpse was impossible to identify.
All we knew about the victim is that it was a young woman.
Then, during the autopsy, they noticed that there had been post-mortem sexual intercourse.
With disturbing evidence of necrophilia and missing body parts, the police launched a major manhunt across Paris. Thanks to briefing the press with the description of the tiny Asian man witnesses saw in the Bois de Boulogne, they soon had a lead.
A taxi driver contacted the Criminal Investigation Department and said he remembered having taken an Asiatic person in the Élanger Street in the 16th district of Paris. He said he had taken him to the Bois de Boulogne and that he had been a bit surprised because he thought he would have had to have taken him to a railroad station because of the suitcases.
Less than 48 hours after those incriminating suitcases had been discovered, the police apprehended their prime suspect outside his apartment.
I grasped around his waist from behind. As I'm quite tall and he's very small, I had to lower myself down so that I could surround his shoulders. At the same time, another policeman told him he was under arrest, and he immediately confessed that he had killed a young woman at his place.
A 32-year-old Japanese exchange student at Paris's exclusive Sorbonne University. Issei Sagawa seemed an unlikely candidate as the owner of 2 suitcases filled with human body parts. But as the police climbed the stairs and entered his apartment, any doubts were swiftly laid to rest.
I've carried out a lot of searches in my career, but this one was the most extraordinary.
What the police discovered is evidence of cannibalism, documented here in the crime scene photographs.
When we opened this little fridge, it was quite incredible. We found a big quantity of human flesh cut off from the corpse of the poor victim in order to be eaten later. We also found a plate containing the remains of a meal with pieces of cooked human flesh and condiments, mustard.
But it was with the discovery of the photo ID of René Hartvelt, a tall 25-year-old Dutch student, that police knew not just what, but who had been eaten. Why was a question only Issei Sagawa could answer.
I don't want to kill, but I couldn't find any way to eat the girl's meat fresh, so I thought I have to kill.
In 1981, a young Japanese cannibal living in Paris made an extraordinary confession.
The beautiful, erotic, and sexual girl. I decided to eat her up.
In murdering and cannibalizing young Dutch student René Hartvelt, Issei Sagawa committed a crime so taboo, press around the world reacted with horror and disbelief.
It's horrible because we couldn't help thinking about René Hartveldt's family. When I think about it today, I can't imagine how hard it would have been for them.
To this day, the parents of René Hartvelt have declined to speak about the case. But for those connected with it that did speak out, it was uncharted territory.
It is really uncommon to deal with cannibalism. It happens. We'd like to think that it doesn't happen, but it happens.
What does make Issei Sagawa's case disturbingly unique is not simply the crime of cannibalism, but the fact that despite confessing to the offense, he has never stood trial. He is the cannibal that walks free. Now, aged 58 and living under a false name in Japan, we spoke to Sagawa in the hope of uncovering not just how a crime such as his could ever come about, but why he was set free, and what are the consequences of this extraordinary situation. Home movies of young Issei seem very far away from the man one paper described as an ogre. Born in 1949 into a respectable, wealthy family, he was raised in a strictly traditional but very supportive environment.
My parents loved me for profoundly.
No bigger than his younger brother, the pair were brought up like twins. Sagawa's tiny size was put down to him nearly dying in a premature birth. The newborn Issei was not just tiny, but very frail.
My parents tried to protect me too much. I was very weak, very ugly, like a small monkey. And even now, I have a big complex for the normal person.
An intelligent child with a passion for books, Issei was especially fond of make-believe, often taking part in a game where his uncle played a ravenous cannibal out to gobble up Issei and his brother.
They tied me and brother, and they pick up and pour us down in the big pot for boiling and for eating us. It's very strange. When I was in the elementary school, I was weak, but what is most suffering me, it's a really cannibal feeling.
Ashamed of cannibalistic feelings that fully awoke with his sexuality, and already self-conscious of his small stature, the teenage Sagawa became increasingly withdrawn at school.
I could never speak to the beautiful female students.
Fully grown at 4'9", Sagawa entered his 20s never having confessed to his cannibalistic impulses, much less acted upon them. Instead, he fantasized over the exotic imagery of Western beauty, popularized by Japan's magazines and television.
Yeah, at the time already the object of my desire is just only the white girl. Beautiful blonde hair, blue eyes, and typically Western girl. I'm very small, ugly, everything is negative elements. So I admire the beautiful existence. It's only just admiration, but my admiration combined with cannibalism is very complicated. I can't analyze.
Investigative reporter Patrick Duval spent months talking with Sagawa in the hope of discovering just how Issei's fantasies transformed into the reality of cannibalism.
He really thought that he had to do it one day or another, and he was only waiting for a sign or something that would tell him it's now time to do it.
For Sagawa, that sign would first come at age 23, when, living in Tokyo with his parents, a German girl with model looks moved into his neighborhood.
I saw a very, very beautiful white girl, blonde hair.
So he decided to get inside her room, and his idea was not to kill her, he told me, but just to eat a part of her bottom.
Equipped with only an umbrella and a rubber Frankenstein mask to aid his attack, the tiny Sagawa's plan seemed very far from realistic.
He went inside the room through the window. He approached to the bed where the girl was sleeping, but his knee touched the body, so the girl woke up.
Suddenly, she jumped up.
She screamed immediately, and he tried first he wanted to escape, but she was stronger than him.
I tried to rush, but she caught my hands. She was very high, very strong girl.
Sagawa was arrested for attempted rape, but charges were soon dropped thanks to a payment from Sagawa's father to the German girl. Perplexed by his son's actions, he sent him to see a psychiatrist.
This doctor concluded he was extremely dangerous.
But not only was no action taken, 5 years later, in 1977, Sagawa packed his bags, checked out of Japan, and flew west. He left behind his parents for the first time to live in Paris, city of romance and the gastronomical capital of Europe. Studying for his doctorate in literature at the prestigious Sorbonne University, Sagawa was by all accounts an excellent student. But he was also surrounded by exactly the kind of temptations so rare in Japan.
For the first time, I went to the class, only the white students. My classmates, few girls are very beautiful, very nice looking.
When in 1981 the tall Renée Hartwelt walked into Sagawa's class, she made an instant impression.
I was completely attracted by the beauty of Renée.
Sagawa secretly sketched a portrait of that first sighting of the 25-year-old Renée. A fellow exchange student, having grown up in Holland, she was by all accounts a trusting, kind-spirited girl. One of the few students that made any effort to talk to the shy Sagawa. She even invited him on a class night out.
She proposed me to take the dinner with other French students. I felt the destiny.
It was to be a night that made a lasting impression on lonely Sagawa.
It was a very, very happy night. She was very, very kind, open-minded. We talked together very frankly and talk about the theater or the literature. A really splendid night. It's really unforgettable.
And she wrote her parents about this meeting that she has made with him, and she was saying he's very nice, and I had a dinner with him, and I really appreciate him.
However, for Sagawa, this encounter meant much more than a newfound friend.
Sagawa was deeply in love with Renée, and his love was so mad that he thought the most he could love her was to eat her.
From that evening on, Sagawa began to plot the murder and cannibalism of Renée Hartwelt. During our interview, he announced that he was keen to discuss the details of this in his native tongue, Japanese.
I think it's a very important thing, so I'd like to speak in Japanese. Okay.
Because of my cannibal desire, my personality had seriously become, how do I say it? It was swallowed up by my obsession.
Over the following weeks, Sagawa forged a relationship with the trusting Renée. Playing on the knowledge that she was fluent in German, he wrote inviting her to his apartment to read a piece of German poetry, claiming he needed to make a tape recording of the poem for a university class.
Dear Renée, thank you very much for this morning. Are you feeling better now? In fact, I have to ask your forgiveness. Can you come tomorrow afternoon, for instance, because it's urgent? I'll pay, of course. Thank you in advance, and sorry again. Issei. P.S. This is definitely the last time.
When Renée arrived, Sagawa had the evening already planned out. Crucial to his plan was a rifle he had purchased several months earlier.
I thought there is no way I could shoot her facing her. Like I said before, I thought it would have to be from her back. And in order for me to aim at her back, she had to be facing away from me. If she reads for me, she sits down at the desk and reads a book, she will have her back to me.
As René read a poem chosen by Sagawa about cannibalism, she was unaware that he was standing behind her, holding a rifle.
I had decided before that the first bite would be the buttocks. I was able to cut through the skin. I'm a fool, so I didn't have a clue about human body structure. I thought that red flesh would appear straight away, but it wasn't like that. And this layer that was like sweet corn just carried on for ages, however deep I cut through. I couldn't reach with my knife, so I ripped out the flesh with my fingers and put it in my mouth. After I had sex with her, I tried to kiss her. For the first time, I said out loud, "I love you" in French, and I felt a huge shiver.
Sagawa would spend a further 48 hours alone with the corpse of René Hartwelt, before attempting to dump her remains in the Bois de Boulogne. When the police later raided his apartment, they discovered Sagawa had stockpiled mementos of his crime, including quantities of human flesh, a tape recording of the murder, and even a camera containing a very incriminating film.
Issei Sagawa photographed the different phases of what he did to this young woman after her death. Quite horrible pictures.
Taking Sagawa into custody, the police already had more than enough for a conviction on the physical evidence alone. However, they were taken aback by their suspect's keenness to confess.
During the interrogation, which happened that night, he had quite a surprising behavior. We were shaken up because he didn't hesitate to give us horrible details without any regret or remorse.
It is for him something that he is still proud of.
Despite Sagawa's guilt never being in question, just 34 months after his confession, he would be a free man, released back into society. Arrested in late June 1981, Issei Sagawa's face stared out from front pages across France and Japan.
That picture showed a kind of moon face with no expression, no fear, no happiness either. Just he wasn't there.
The press were fascinated by the man who not only murdered and ate a female student, but seemed almost boastful of his crime, as journalist Jean-Pierre recalls when he met the incarcerated Sagawa.
He tapped on his legs and said, that piece is very good to eat.
But despite the fact that Sagawa's guilt was never in doubt, he would not only walk free from his crime, he would do so with the assistance of the French government.
In France, for every criminal case, there is at least a psychological and a psychiatric forensic examination. It's written into the penal code.
Locked away in Paris's maximum security prison, Sagawa's psychiatric examination took over a year to complete. We have uncovered the original report that details the French authorities' findings.
Dans ce rapport d'expertise,
In this report, Sagawa was described as hung up by his height. He is described as not self-assured, oversensitive, and, most of all, emotionally cold and self-satisfied when he talked about the murder.
dans le récit des actes qu'il a commis. Quelqu'un qui est capable d'avoir
Someone who is capable of feeling guilty wouldn't commit such an act.
pour commettre un acte comme ça,
You have to be completely devoid of some human emotions,
d'un certain nombre de qualités,
among which is the sharing of the universal taboo of cannibalism.
notamment de partager le tabou universel de l'anthropophagie.
The report also took into account everything from Sagawa's upbringing in Japan to the very public fashion in which he attempted to dispose of his victim's body. The conclusion reached was that Sagawa was insane and unfit to stand trial.
Unquestionably, it would have been unacceptable to try this man. In France, we don't try mentally ill persons. This is the difference between democratic countries and dictatorships.
René Hartveld's family, though, had a different opinion to Sagawa's lawyer. But their request for a second medical opinion was never met.
Famille voudrait que ceux qui ont
Families would like the person who killed their child or close relative to be tried in court and put in prison for the rest of their life. But if he was not liable at the moment of the crime, the law is the law.
I think that it was a good decision.
When I was judged insane and transferred to hospital, I didn't feel anything.
Though placed indefinitely in a Paris mental hospital, this was not the conclusion to the strange case of Issei Sagawa. Just as his father had come to his rescue when arrested for attacking a German girl in Tokyo, he once more came to his son's aid.
Employed a most expensive lawyer, Philippe Lemaire, and he was very powerful and influenced even the government, French government. So that's why I was saved.
We asked the man, Sagawa says, saved him, how exactly this was done.
I was in contact with the Department of the Interior and the Public Health Department. I told them I found it quite unfair that the French taxpayers paid for the hospitalization of Issei Sagawa, in the sense that nothing was done for him, and that we should send him back to Japan so he could be hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital and be cured.
The French government agreed, and 34 months after Sagawa first confessed to the murder, necrophilia and cannibalism of René Hartveld, he was put on a plane and sent home. The French authorities insisted on only one condition to his repatriation.
He definitely cannot come back to France. He never did come back, and he never will.
Never having stood trial for his crime in France, the shocking truth is that as soon as Sagawa set foot on Japanese soil, he would be a free man.
When he came back down the stair of the airplane, he could have take a cab and go downtown Tokyo.
However, this fact was hidden from the press, thanks to Sagawa's father's stage management of the event.
My father knew if they got me free, all Japanese and all European American journalists attacking my father or my family. So my father asked the Matsuzawa hospital, Japanese hospital, psychologist hospital, for me to enter.
Bundled into the back of a waiting ambulance and taken directly to Matsuzawa Mental Hospital outside Tokyo, in the eyes of the world's press, this is where Sagawa will be held for the rest of his life. But nothing could be further from the truth.
When he arrived in Japan, he was a free person. because in Japan he had not committed any crime.
Just 18 months after returning, Sagawa checked himself out of hospital and back into Japanese society.
He hasn't been punished. I was disgusted.
Honestly, we were shocked to see him released so quickly.
It was the miscarriage of justice.
Despite the outrage at Sagawa's release, he has lived free in Japan for the last 23 years. Today, he resides in a council flat just outside of Tokyo, age 58 and living under a false name. We visited the self-confessed cannibal killer at his home and found he is under no supervision from either the medical profession or law enforcement.
Hi, hello. Here is my room, dining room. And I like very much the classical music. And I loved the Beethoven so much when I was childhood because I liked his life first. His life was very miserable, very passionate, and sometimes he got crazy. But his music is really splendid.
Sagawa is unemployed and lives alone.
This is the present for my birthday of my brother, younger brother. And he is always sleeping. But here is a battery here. I like dogs, but I like living dogs, but unfortunately I can't do so.
Following the death of Sagawa's parents 2 years ago, today he performs a daily ritual in their honor.
I'll show you how to do. My father and mother, very strict person, especially for the sexual aspect. When I went to Paris for studying, I thought I could escape from the stress of my parents.
Rather than escape his family, upon his return, Sagawa discovered that the negative press caused by his actions had crippled them. His brother developed stress-related asthma. His father had to resign from his high-powered job, and Sagawa's mother attempted suicide.
I'm full of regret for, of course, my victim, her family, my parents, my brother, everything, everybody.
Despite this claim, Sagawa's actions since his crime would suggest the contrary. In the mid-80s, he wrote In the Fog, a book published against the express wishes of both his own family and René Hartveld's.
It's essentially the story of his crime written from, by the first person, by him. And I don't think it's literature. I think it's unethical garbage.
In spite, or maybe because of, its lurid content, In the Fog sold out across Japan. With the Japanese public hungry for more, Sagawa not only wrote a further 19 books about his crime, he soon began to diversify into new avenues.
Over the last quarter century, Sagawa has managed to appear in virtually every form of media in Japan. It started out mostly in books. That was the beginning. He then shifted. He's been a columnist in the newspaper, fetish magazines, standard magazines as well. He's lectured, or he's been part of a symposium at a Japanese university and set 2 stage shows.
Sagawa may have appeared in many different media, but the subject never changed. The murder and cannibalism of a tall Western woman.
Now he's like a mini celebrity in that he was the guy who ate someone in Paris. Because what happens is, as time passes on, the vulgarity of the crime and the shock of the crime starts to wear off, and no one can kind of like visualize it anymore. They forgot the victim's name.
But overseas observers to Sagawa's rise to fame were less inclined to forget René Hartwelt.
You know, for me, who saw what he did to his victim and had to explain this to her family, I find it shocking that he used his freedom in order to get famous for what he did. At the very least, he could have remained discreet once he was free in Japan.
But for Sagawa, it seemed discretion was never an option.
I appeared often in the porno video. Of course, it's a bad thing, but I couldn't resist.
Always keen to revisit the scene of the crime, for Sagawa's bizarre pornography, he cast leading ladies that were tall and Western, or ideally, like his victim, Dutch. For this production, he even filmed at a theme park based on Holland.
It's just like Amsterdam. And my female friend, her mother is Dutch. That's why I select the situation.
Like everything else with Sagawa's name on it, there was a thriving market for these films in Japan. What could be the appeal of a man famous for eating a Western woman?
As far as the way Japanese perceive Western women, there's always been a fascination and a sort of untouchable distance because of the scarcity.
Because of that sexualization of white women, the crime was seen differently than had it been a Japanese woman. And Sagawa became, in a sense, kind of an anti-hero.
Sagawa may have reveled in his public persona as an anti-hero, but far more alarming is that he continued to pursue his obsessions in private. Under his false name, Sagawa has met up with a string of tall Western women working in the Tokyo vice trade. He's even been issued with a passport to holiday abroad with them.
I have a young Australian friend and young Canadian friend, and we take a trip to Iceland. It's not me who asked the pose like this, but they choose the style. I spent all money for them because the price of flight, the food, the hotel, everything I paid. So I finally bankrupt.
With no way to contact the women identified in Sagawa's photos, we have only his assurance of their safety. But what we do know for sure is that Sagawa has been left unchecked for decades by the Japanese authorities, despite very public evidence of a continued obsession with cannibalism.
My cannibal desire is just the same. When I see all the beautiful girls' legs, I want to eat. So I'm not cured at all.
The biggest movie of the year is now on DVD. Prepare yourself. The rebellion begins. Harry Potter and the...
Issei Sagawa, the cannibal killer who escaped justice to become Japan's most macabre celebrity, is today largely forgotten in his homeland, living alone and under a false name on the outskirts of Tokyo. The freedom that Sagawa has enjoyed for the last 23 years is highly irregular, given the fact that he was declared both insane and dangerous. During the filming of this documentary, Sagawa displayed increasing evidence that whatever condition drove him to commit his crime was far from dormant.
Okay, here is my bedroom, and it's a kind of kingdom. Everything here, the big television, I enjoy the movie or drama. And also, I have a lot of cuddly toys. I like animals very much. And above, I like beautiful young girls. And I'm already 58 years old, but I have still a little bit sexual desire. But now I'm not interested at all the white women. I hate them. I found the Japanese women are the most beautiful in the world.
The reality of this change in sexual tastes means that Sagawa now feels the urge to cannibalize young Japanese women.
I'm not cured at all. But killing is out of question for me. I never want to try to do again.
Despite Sagawa's personal assurance, the reality is that he is under no supervision from the authorities, and the only medication he receives is a prescription for depression. At our request, Sagawa agreed to attend his first psychiatric assessment in over 10 years. To prepare for this consultation, one of Japan's most highly regarded criminal psychologists extensively researched the French psychiatric report on Sagawa, his Japanese medical history, and Sagawa's own books about his crime.
When I read your book, you mentioned at the beginning that you had become caught up in cannibalism when you were very young. Would you say you stopped daydreaming about your cannibal fantasies?
No, I haven't. In my case, my libido and appetite are, I don't know how you say it professionally, but they are connected. This is very important. For instance, you see the beautiful girls on the train in the summer, and you see their legs, don't you? I think they look delicious. That much is true.
Do you link your fantasies to masturbation?
Of course. That's why I have to suppress my feelings. I masturbate, and when I finish, my feelings disappear. It calms down. So I just repeat that.
About the origins of his cannibalism, he had this cannibal fantasy from his childhood. A child suckles onto mother's breast. A child survives eating breasts. So it is not that strange that a child would want to eat something that he loves. When he was a small child, he wasn't a strong kid, and he was brought up spoiled by his parents. In other words, they overprotected him, and perhaps he never learned how to suppress those impulse desires. Another point is, he has written in detail about what he did, and he still talks about his crime. He has told us that none of it feels real to him. The fact that he has cut those things off from himself means he might be suffering from depersonalization too. As a result, he is incredibly cold as a person. And deep down, he doesn't regret what he has done. I can see that there's an emotional coldness about him. He has a tendency to slowly turn the other person into an object. I think this is very dangerous.
Whilst he has been celebrated as an anti-hero in Japan, no attempt has been made to monitor the cannibalistic urges Sagawa still appears to have. Free to roam amongst Tokyo's 12 million residents, it is a freedom that has been harshly criticized.
Knowing that he committed the crime, and he's confessed to it and pretty much made a living off of that for the last quarter century, I think there's a huge miscarriage of justice.
He should have been sent to a judicial psychiatric hospital and made to stay there for a very long time. He should have been treated, but he hasn't been.
Now, that being said, how does one rectify that problem is an entirely different question.
With no provision under Japanese law to forcibly treat those suffering from dangerous mental health problems, the question of what to do with Issei Sagawa today remains unanswered, despite over 4 decades of warnings from those who have met him.
He's insane. He's a psychopath, sexual psychopath.
Next week, we look at the case of David Harker, who killed a Darlington woman and allegedly ate her flesh. 2 more lives were also claimed. That's Cannibal Killer, next Monday at 10, here on 5.